Hello my friends. So it's a look in the dark, chapter 10, now 4, and this is part 7. Sue is about to spend her first night staying with the Greens. Sue went to bed with a mug of hot chocolate, a rough draft of Denis' Young People's Guide to the Common Seagulls, and a town guide for Frome. She was a little bothered that she had not telephoned home, but it was a deliberate decision to let her father get used to the idea a little before she talked to him about her sudden absence. She sat cross-legged on her new bed, turning the events of the day over, and somewhat bemused by it all. She still had a slight suspicion that Alice and the White Rabbit might put in an appearance. One thing was sure in her head: the Greens were the best thing to happen to her since she left school, and she was going to enjoy helping them any way she could. From her room she could just about hear the classical music playing, and though she didn't know that it was Tchaikovsky's Symphony No. 5 in E minor, it seemed just the right sound for a very special day. By the time the telephone rang downstairs, Sue was in a deep, peaceful sleep. Carol lifted the receiver and a rather irritated voice said, "Is that Carol Green?" "Yes, who's speaking, please?" "This is Bill Parry here, Sue's father. I want to know what the devil's going on with my daughter." "Oh, hello, Mr. Parry. Look, I'm really sorry we had to leave in a hurry. I can understand your concern, but Sue is just fine. I met her at her last job and I heard she was unemployed right now, and as we were looking for a bright girl for an important spot of office work right now, it seemed like a good idea to..." "That's all very well, young lady, but would it have not been better to let her talk to me first?" "Oh dear, Mr. Parry, I'm sorry I've annoyed you. It was me that encouraged Sue to leave at once. I've been thoughtless. Please forgive me, and let me explain." The gentle, humble-spoken Tyrone tones touched the right chords in Bill Parry. "Go ahead." "My husband is Danny Green, the wildlife writer. Perhaps you've heard of him?" "No." "Well, you will. We are engaged in a very special environmental study of epic and planet-important proportions. At the moment, some aspects of it are highly confidential, and there is urgent paperwork to be done. That's where your Sue comes in. She's a lovely girl. Danny and I are very impressed. You must be very proud of her." "I was until she was dismissed for theft." "Yeah, so you know about that. Debbie, my wife, says that..." "Mr. Parry, I certainly know about that, and what is more, I can assure you with 100% certainty that your daughter is innocent of theft. In fact, I could tell you who the guilty person is. It's all very unfortunate, but can also say with like certainty that I am delighted your charming daughter is no longer working for the chilling and unpleasant Mr. Major Stanhurst." "It was a job. How can you be so sure about her innocence?" "At a later date, Mr. Parry, I promise you I will explain why I'm so certain." "Why do you doubt her?" Danny was laughing at the way Carol had stopped the irate father in his tracks and now had him turning in the other direction. "The main reason is because Sue has changed. She's been so moody lately. At one point I thought she was taking drugs. She was so irritable, snappy. I knew something was wrong with her." "Do you enjoy your work, Mr. Parry?" "Yeah, I guess I do." "Why?" Danny was deciding that his wife would have made a good barrister. "Well, I guess I like the people I work with, and there are great perks with the job, travel and all that." "Believe me, nobody could enjoy working for Major Stanhurst. He's the most ignorant, obnoxious brute of a man, and I saw firsthand the contempt that he had for your very hard-working daughter." "Well, I'll have to go around and sort him out then, won't I?" "Mr. Parry, I promise you, very soon Major Stanhurst is going to get sorted out. But it would be best if you didn't interfere at this stage. Would you like me to give Sue a shout? She's gone to bed. She looked very tired, so she did, but I'm sure she would want to talk to you." "No, that's okay. Are you sure she's all right?" "She's just fine. We have enough work here to keep her going for a while, and she will get treated like family, I promise you. When this is over, we will do our best to see she is recommended to anyone with a vacancy. Do you want to talk to my husband?" Danny hoped not, and his hope was fulfilled. Carol promised to remind Sue to phone the next night, sent regards to Debbie Parry, and commended Bill Parry on his interior decorating. "Listen, love, I'm sorry I was a bit sharp with you." "Perfectly understandable. It was thoughtless of me to bring Sue in such haste." "Well, Thanks for giving my daughter some work. Oh, she's doing us a big favour. Can I ask you to do us one favour too? How do you mean? Please don't tell anybody about any of this. It could compromise the results of our study. Most important of all, we don't want Stanhurst to know what we're doing. I can't impress that enough, Mr. Parry. Not a problem. Not a word, I promise. Oh, and the name is Bill. As Carol replaced the receiver, Danny gave her a kiss on the cheek. Well done, love. You turned him around. The phone rang again, and this time Danny lifted it and was pleased when it was Ricky Claymore to see how the day had gone. The aristocrat was overjoyed to hear they'd found a suitable intelligence officer and was encouraged that his suggestion had not only been taken seriously but acted on with enthusiasm. He also wanted them to follow another suggestion, take some of the records with them and leave most for Sue to work at so as to have plenty of time with Carol's family in Ireland. He agreed they could do some investigating of links that Stanhurst's records revealed in Northern Ireland, but he encouraged them to be very careful over there. The next morning, Carol was washing clothes and preparing what to take to Ireland. Danny was working at another Northern Irish record to add to the one he'd already decoded, and in the meantime Sue was coming to grips with her new job. At coffee break they all came together in the living room, and Sue was very angry at what she was unlocking from the records. Rhino horns, sea eagle's eggs, just what kind of people are these? It was clear already that this was more than a job to her. Once they enjoyed their break, Danny phoned Carol's traffic cop brother-in-law again. He tried earlier, and Carol's sister Anna suggested he could find Dave at home about 11:30, and she was right. As before, Dave was full of warnings, cautions and grumbles, but was soon promising to see who the owner of the car was, that is, the car Theo had been watching coming and going at the yard behind the Major's office. Dave's closing comments went along typical lines. Dan, I mean this. You're not a bad spud, as Anne would say. Please be careful. Has your trip to Ireland got anything to do with this? Evading the question, Danny asked, are you a traffic cop or do you work for Special Branch? I'll call you tonight, right? And this is going to cost you a night of good ale sometime. As they worked up to lunchtime, the loud and beautiful music filling the house was like a good meal to the ears of Sue. So there was ate a ploughman's lunch. She asked Carol, what was that last piece of music? Bruck's Violin Concerto. Do you like classical music? Not listened to it much really. Dad's a real jazz man and our house was always full of Oscar Peterson or someone. Who was Bruck? Bruck was a German composer and I don't know much about him. I think he died in the 1920s. 1920 actually, Carol. Danny was glad he knew something about a composer that she didn't. Are you sure, Dan? 100%, and he was born in Cologne. He mocked her accent. As he looked at the impressed faces of the two females, he wasn't going to tell them that he'd just read it on the album cover. Later, as Danny was running through a book and showing Sue the column of Latin names of birds placed in a parallel column with the English names, he gently asked her when her father would be home from work. He added, I think you should ring him and have a chat, Sue. I know, Danny, I will. I just want to be at peace with him. Well, I expect he feels the same, and you know Carol thinks she did get over strongly the fact that you're totally innocent. My dad's okay really, you know. He's a bit like you and Carol. He fights for what he believes to be right. Good for him. Only trouble with it, those of us who try to do that, is that we sometimes end up fighting each other. It's good to be a peacemaker too, if it's possible to be one. Thanks, Danny. I'll phone him in 15 minutes. He should be in by then. Good. Well, I'll give you some space, but when you finish talking to your dad, stop working and come downstairs. You've done a brilliant job today. Danny lifted up a pile of records that Sue had been working at. We would never have expected you to cover so much ground so quickly. Well done, but tonight you must relax. You know, Danny, it's so weird working for you two after working for Major Stanhurst. You've both been kind to me all day. I've had more praise in the last 24 hours than he would have given me in 24 years. I am so happy here. Danny smiled as he closed the door and just said, good. At 6:15, Sue dialed the familiar home in London and concentrated on a mental picture of her dad reaching for the telephone as he turned the television volume down, looking a little irritated that he would miss the rest of the news. As the phone began to ring, Carol in the as the phone began to ring in the well-cared-for home in Clapham, Sue in Frome had a mental flashback to the day her former employer had discovered that all the photocopy paper was missing, and the way he'd been so unkind when she was in tears protesting her innocence, the appeal she'd made to him to get the police. Well, she sure understood now why he wouldn't do that. The last thing Stanhurst wanted was the police around his office. She remembered how he'd thrown her coat and handbag at her, told her to get out, and how Theo had comforted her as she cried and cried. The reaction when she got home, her emotions welling up inside her like water in a boiling kettle. "Hello, Bill Parry here." "Hi, Dad." At the sound of his daughter's voice, the anxious father had emotional problems too. He thought about the uncharacteristic verbal pounding his wife had given him the night before for ever doubting Sue's honesty in the first place. "Sue, are you okay, love?" "Yeah, Dad, I'm just fine. Are you okay?" "I've been worrying about you all day, Sue." "You don't need to worry about me, Dad. I have a great job here, and Danny and Carol are the two nicest people you could meet. They're so kind." "Well, that's good. But I've been worrying anyway, and I'm worried about us." She felt a burning tear slide down her face, but had no idea that the father was having a very similar experience. "Dad, please believe me. I never took anything from Major Stanhurst's office. Not even a paper clip. I swear it." "Listen, Sue. Love, I believe you, and I'm very sorry I ever doubted you. It's just you've been so odd lately. So irritable. Not like yourself at all. And I thought, well, you know what I thought." "I know, Dad, and yes, I've been difficult. I don't know how you and Mum have ever put up with me. The truth is I hated the job. He was a nightmare. Nothing ever pleased him. He was really nasty to me." "Why didn't you leave, love? You've always told me to stick at things. There wasn't anything else. I didn't want to disappoint you." "Oh, Sue, we've both been very foolish. I should never allow myself to think you were a thief. Will you forgive me, love? Of course, and Daddy," she didn't call him that much these days, "will you forgive me for being such a misery? I really am sorry." "I wish you were here, Sue, so that I could give you a big hug." He was so relieved to have his friendship back with his daughter again. "How's Mum?" "Oh, she's fine. Telling me off big time she was. She had it hard while we weren't getting on. I better go and give her a hug and tell her we have it all sorted. Are you going to be all right down there in Somerset?" Sue related as much as she could without giving any secrets away. What Bill Parry got from her most was her enthusiasm and her joy. It was the old Sue back again. As they concluded the conversation, Sue felt as if she'd received that cuddle from her much-loved father. Bill Parry put down the telephone. He picked up a pen and wrote down Nature Watch magazine, page 22, Arctic Terns, Danny Green. Bill didn't realise that it should be Arctic Terns with an E, not a U. But he was sure about one thing. First thing in the morning he'd be buying the magazine so that he could see some of the writings of his daughter's new employer. When he told her, his wife, that he and Sue had sorted everything out, she offered a silent prayer of thanks, and her heart threw off a heavy burden that had worn her down for weeks. Bill knew she had been at her wit's end, and he was so glad to see a genuine smile back on her pretty face. Carol didn't appreciate it fully, but her intervention at the Parry household had healed the damage and given worried parents their peace back again. That's it, my friends. That's the end of chapter 10. So what's chapter 11 all about?